Good afternoon, Marines and sailors. So thanks, Lieutenant Colonel Ferguson, for the introduction, and also Colonel Tucker for the, I don't know where he went, but for the encouraging words on resiliency. Major Embers and Sergeant Major Edwards for allowing me to come here and speak to your Marines and sailors today. I also want to thank Lieutenant Colonel retired Rick Wolf from SSO for all the organization of putting this on and having the heart to get Marines and sailors in front of the issues on resiliency. As I was introduced, Lieutenant Colonel Ferguson talked about the work I do at Mighty Oaks Foundation, and I'll share a little bit why, as I talk today, I'll share why it's so important to me and why we do that program at Mighty Oaks. But essentially, the core of Mighty Oaks is we do 30 one-week programs for combat trauma, those who are struggling with many of the things that warriors struggle with today, like suicide and divorce and post-traumatic stress. But the reason we come and do these resiliency events like this is because we're trying to put ourselves out of business, right? Because I know if I could maybe pass on something today that'll make you think about resiliency, think about the battles ahead, and maybe you can make a decision in advance that you won't end up at a place like Mighty Oaks. So it's really on my heart to come to and get the opportunity to be in front of Marines and sailors like you and talk about some of the experiences that other warriors have faced, some of the pitfalls and hardships they faced so that you won't end up there. And the truth is that as Marines and those who participate in war, or even those who train and prepare for war, right, we're doing something that's not a natural thing. And we need to do it. We're called to do it. As Marines, we're expected to do it, but it's not a natural thing. And being Marines is hard. And it doesn't matter how tough you think you are, and I hope everybody here thinks they're tough, because if not, you're not the same Marine Corps I'm from, right? We think we're tough. We think we're superheroes. We're supposed to. But it doesn't matter how tough we think we are. The truth is, this job, being a Marine, it's going to change you. You're not going to leave the Marine Corps the same way you came in. 100% guaranteed. I don't have to know you to know that. You're not. It's going to change you. But whether it changes you for better or for worse, well, that's up to you. That's up to you and the decisions you make and based on the experiences you have. Now, I know everybody here has heard of post-traumatic stress. You've heard of the 20-plus suicides a day, the ridiculous divorce rates that happen just right here on Camp Pendleton. Or it could be as simple as living an angry, bitter, and miserable life. But that doesn't have to be the case. What separates those situations from those who are able to come home from places like combat or a job as being a Marine? What separates those who have these hardships from those who are quality Marines, able to continue on as quality Marines, able to reintegrate home as husbands and wives and parents, eventually civilians again? What separates them? The answer is resiliency. Right, resiliency and the decisions we make in advance that prepare us for the battles ahead. The Marine Corps defines resiliency. We teach the 3 pillars of resiliency: mind, body, and spirit. Right? You've all heard that: mind, body, spirit. I was just speaking I was telling Lieutenant Colonel Ferguson, I do a lot of speaking for the Air Force. Their Yellow Ribbon Resiliency Program, and the first time I went, I had my notes. I'm always looking at my notes right before I go out. I'm looking at my notes and I'm reading my notes and I'm reading the 3 pillars of resiliency. And the Air Force MC says, today we're going to talk about the 4 pillars of resiliency. And I panicked because I'm like, oh man, what's the 4th one? And so he starts rolling them out. He says, the Air Force talks about mind, body, spirit, and social. And I thought, okay, well, the Marine Corps doesn't have social, so we're good. Right? The Air Force has a totally different culture and environment. But as Marines, we talk about mind, body, spirit. But I don't think we really even think about what those words mean. Now, I can share with you a lot of lectures and lessons on resiliency, but I think Marines always take best to a story. And so I'm going to share a story with you. When I was, after 9/11, I ended up as part of a JSOC task force. For those who don't know, it's a Joint Special Operations Command Task Force. I had a very unique job. I served as an AFO, Advanced Force Operator, which in simple terms is clandestine logistics. So go out and punch out in front of a special operations unit and do clandestine logistics. So I was often in civilian clothes, civilian vehicles. This particular day, I was with one other operator. He was a Navy SEAL. I was a 4th Street Guy Marine, and we were both in civilian clothes. We had a Toyota Prado, which is like a Toyota 4Runner. We didn't have weapons. We had each a pistol. And we're driving down a road called Jalalabad Road, heading to the eastern side of the capital city of Kabul. Anybody been there before, Jalalabad Road? So a couple of you, right? So I'm going on Jalalabad Road, and as I'm driving, I seen this Hilux pickup truck behind us, which is like the national vehicle of the Taliban, right? And it's following us, and it's loaded with guys that look like they came out of the mountains. They look like Taliban, right? They had tribal clothing on. They had AK-47s, big beard, dusty. I noticed the RPG, a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, and so these guys were loaded in the back of this truck. We always had a joke: how many Taliban can you fit in a Hilux pickup truck? Yeah, there you go. One more, right? They're piled in this truck and hanging out the sides, and we were like, hey, we want to make sure they're not following us. So I did a technique that we learned in my driving training called deviating your route. So I'm on Jalalabad Road. I made a right off of the road, made the block, and they continued to follow us. When I turned right back on Jalalabad Road, my technique verified to me that they were following us. But it also let them know that I knew they were following us, which started a pursuit. So they started chasing us. I didn't live on base. I didn't live in Bagram. I lived actually in Kabul, so I knew the city really well. And I thought, man, I could lose them in the city. So I started trying to get through the traffic. Now, if anybody's ever been in third world country before, you think San Diego traffic's bad? It's not. Like, third world traffic is crazy. So the traffic got really congested. I had a hard time getting away. And I got to this circle called Masood Circle, a major intersection in Kabul. And as I got to this circle, the traffic started to congest and stop. And all of a sudden, I didn't have anywhere to go, and I had to stop my vehicle. And somehow their vehicle got around the side of us, got about 10 or 20 feet in front of us, and or 10, 20 yards in front of us, and stopped. And I remember a few guys jumped at the back. I real vividly remember the passenger door opening, and the passenger stepped out, and he had his AK-47, and he put his hand up at us to stop us. And we were in a bad situation. Right? That situation is being called stuck on the X. Right? And a couple of things you learn in training about the X is, number one, you have to recognize that you're on the X. You got to know you're in a bad situation. Number two, you have to get off the X, right? You can't stay there, simple Marine Corps logic, right? You stay there, something bad's gonna happen, you gotta move. And so I'm so thankful for the training we do in the Marine Corps. We do things over and over and over, and when that situation presents itself, we just execute. And I did exactly what I was trained to do. I hit the gas and I aimed my vehicles towards theirs. I remember smashing into the front of that truck. Probably my favorite memory of Afghanistan is when I hit that truck, I seen the little Taliban guys fly out the back of that thing and spun that truck out of the way. And when the front of that truck spun out of the way, it left like a perfect pathway to get off that intersection. But there was like one more obstacle. There's like this 100-year-old policeman, and he has his little uniform on and his whistle, and he's blowing his whistle at me to stop. He's like, beep, beep. And there's no way I was gonna stop. I was gonna run him over. I'd already hit someone, so I went straight towards him. And what I love about Afghans is they always jump on the winning team. So when he saw I was gonna run him over, he jumped on my side, and he started blowing his whistle and stopping cars, and actually directed traffic to get me off that intersection. He was actually saved the day for us. And I don't know what those guys want on an intersection, but I do know this. If Dave and I would have stopped on an X, if we would have stopped on Masood Circle that day, we would have put up a heck of a fight, but the truth is we probably would have been killed or taken. And Marines, look, you don't have to go to Afghanistan or Iraq to find yourself on an X in life. You're gonna find yourself from time to time stuck on an X in life, whether from combat or the hardships of just life in general, and you're gonna have to make a decision. You're gonna have to make a decision whether you're gonna stay there or you're gonna move forward. And a few years later, in 2007, I came home from my 8th and last deployment to Afghanistan, and I found myself stuck on that X again. I was diagnosed with PTSD, never even saw it coming or never thought that would be anything I faced, but I didn't follow those two simple rules. One, I didn't identify that I was on the X because of my pride or shame to admit something was wrong. And because of that, I chose to stay there for a period of almost 3 years, and it almost cost me everything. The question isn't in life if you're gonna find yourself on the X. It's when you do, because you will, what are you gonna do? And the work that we do at Mighty Oaks, work with other combat warriors who found themselves essentially stuck on that X in life, I found it really comes down to one thing, and that's a choice. A choice. We have to choose and make a decision whether we're gonna stay there and die when we find ourselves on the X's in our life, whether literally or metaphorically, or we're gonna press forward, right? And the most effective choices, I believe, in life are the ones that we make in advance and then we execute when times get tough, right? As Marines, we would never wait till we get in chaotic situations to decide what to do. We always know what we're gonna do. We train for it. We have SOPs for it. We prepare for it. As a Force Recon Marine, I would never punch out of the gate of a forward operating base and say, hey, team, what are we gonna do when we get a forward ambush? I don't know, we'll figure it out when it happens. No, we know exactly what we're gonna do. That when that Taliban force presents itself, we freaking crush them, right? We trained in advance, we know exactly what we're gonna do, and we win. We prepare for the battles ahead. We make pre-decisions for the battles ahead that we were prepared. But I wish I could always say that I did that in my personal life. I did it as a Marine, but I hadn't done it in my personal life, and I think that's the case for many, many Marines. We're so great at being professionals, knowing our job, knowing how to execute in advance. When it comes to our personal lives, we don't do the same thing. My hardships in life didn't start when I came home from Afghanistan. In fact, I went in the Marine Corps in 1993, so it kind of ages me a little bit. But you guys are like 1993, they had Marine Corps back then? Yes, they did. Right, but yeah, My father was a Marine. He is a Vietnam Marine. In fact, my son Hunter is a Marine as well now. So we have 3 generations of Marines in my family, something we're super proud of. My father was a Marine during Vietnam. He was the 0311 infantryman. And when he got home from Vietnam, I don't think they didn't talk about resiliency. They didn't have the programs like we have now. They didn't have the help. So he struggled with a lot of the same things that many of our warriors struggle with today. He's a very angry guy, a lot of alcohol, a lot of women in his life. He never seemed very settled or content in life. And if anybody's ever been around someone like that, there was a lot of physical abuse in my home. And I don't mean like belt whippings and spankings. I mean, fist to face physical abuse in my home. I had a brother, he was a year older, and the 2 of us were very close. In fact, if anybody's ever grown up in a dysfunctional home, siblings get really close. And so my brother and I would talk about joining the Marines. We talked about, that would be a fresh start of life for us, and that was kind of our goal, our escape plan from my father. And when I was 14 and my brother was 15, he was shot and killed. And he was the closest person to me in my life at that time, and it was extremely devastating to me, and I went into very deep isolation. In fact, I probably wasn't going to graduate high school. And my family, the little bit of family I had in my life at the time, fell apart. And I found myself just before my 16th birthday living alone. I went to a Marine recruiter named Staff Sergeant Brown, and I'll forever be grateful for Staff Sergeant Brown because he had a compassionate heart for me. Or maybe he just had a quota to fill. I don't know what the case was, but he got me in the Marine Corps without a high school diploma and gave me a brand new chance at life. In fact, I made a promise to him that I would graduate high school when I went in the Marine Corps, and I got my GED from Copper Mountain College right there in 29 Palms, California. For those who've been there, that's where I graduated high school, and fulfilled my commitment to him. And I had a brand new chance. The Marine Corps for me was a brand new chance at life, and I embraced every bit of it. I always wanted to be in some type of special operations because I love the water, but there was no way I was going to join the Navy. Sorry, Louise in the back, right? So I wanted to be in that kind of a job that I got to swim and jump out of airplanes and stuff. So I knew about being a recon Marine. I tried out my first year in the Marine Corps and was accepted. I made it in to be a recon Marine. And I could tell you, a lot of great jobs in the Marine Corps for me. I'm so thankful I served in that job. It was such a great place for a young man to come in and be mentored by just incredible men. And came in at a time where there wasn't any wars going on, lots of training. I got to really learn how to be a Marine, got to learn how to do my job. And it wasn't until almost 10 years later, I remember on September 11th, watching those planes fly in the World Trade Center buildings, watching it on television, my wife and I together. I knew my life was going to be different. For those who were in the Marine Corps at that time, I knew that, I know you guys felt the same way. When you watched that unfold, we knew our life was going to be radically different. And no one was like, oh my gosh, we're going to war. I remember at my command, everyone was showing up at 3rd Force like, hey, what's up, sir? Like, when are we going to do this? Like, when are we going to make this right? The Marine Corps was very motivated at that time. And I really wanted to deploy. And I got a chance to try out for this JSOC task force and got the privilege of serving with the Naval Special Operations and Naval Special Warfare in that capacity for a period of 4 years and 8 deployments. And it was everything I ever wanted. When I went to Afghanistan the first time, I would have said I was prepared. We talk about the pillars of resiliency, right? Mind, body, spirit. I was mentally prepared. I was mentally tough. I thought I knew my job really well, and I was excited to do it. I was definitely physically prepared. I was in peak top shape at that time, and man, I felt like I could do my job like anybody else in my team, and I was really excited. And I would have said I was spiritually prepared because my dog tags had the word Christian stamped on it, but I didn't really know what that meant, to be honest with you. In fact, I looked at Christian men at that time. I would go to church with my family when we were home, but to be honest with you, I think I took my family to church to really kind of control my family. I was very controlling of my family. I took my wife to church because she's going to be, a Christian lady and be loyal and faithful and everything we want out of a woman, and my kids would go to Sunday school. But I looked at Christianity and faith as weak. That's the way I looked at it as a young man. And so when I went to Afghanistan and I was presented with doing this very difficult job, I felt like I had to make a decision. I felt like I had to choose between being a warrior and being a person of faith. And so that spiritual piece for me, that mind, body, spirit, that spirit piece for me was something I made a decision to put on a shelf and do later in life. And for me, I believe that left a giant hole inside of me that I filled with hate and rage and anger and bitterness. Over my time in Afghanistan, like I said earlier, I didn't live on a base. I lived in the Afghan community. I lived with Afghan families. I played soccer with their kids. I ate dinner in their homes. I became very close to them, and I learned what the Taliban had done to them. And then I got to see firsthand what the Taliban did to these people. And so I developed a very deep hatred towards the Taliban. And my command had this kind of Viking war culture mentality, and everybody was very intense and felt that way. And probably the most intense and hateful people that I worked with were the Afghans towards the Taliban because of the experiences they had. And so I really bought into that, and I embraced it, and it worked really well in Afghanistan. To be violent and have this Viking mentality at my command, it worked really well. But where it didn't work well was 24 hours later when I come home and my wife would pick me up from the airport. I couldn't come home and flip a switch and be, husband and father and like Mr. Rogers, the friendly neighbor. Like, I just couldn't do that. I was still an angry, intense dude. And I'll tell you, I'm ashamed to say, but when I look back at that time in my life, my home was not a safe place for my children, for my wife. My kids were scared of me. My wife was scared of me. Everyone walked in eggshells because they were worried if they say the wrong thing, I'd throw a temper tantrum like a 15-year-old child. I'd punch things, yell, scream over them, break things in our home. And my family was scared of me. And I remember one time particularly, I was coming home from Afghanistan. My little girl was so happy I was going to be home for her birthday. She actually rescheduled her birthday party that I was going to be home from Afghanistan. And my little girl's having her birthday party, and she's very opinionated, and she still is. But she didn't like the icing on her cake. And I reached down and grabbed a handful of my little girl's birthday cake, and I threw it against the wall and destroyed my little girl's birthday. I remember thinking, who does, what kind of person, what kind of dad does stuff like that? And the truth is, I behave that way all the time. And that's just one example. And I recognized that, so I started distancing myself from my family. And I thought, I can fix this later, but right now I have to be this way. I have to be hard. I have to be, mean. I have to be this way. And I believe that. And so I distanced myself from my family, and it started causing this division. Over time, that anger turned into this anxiety. I didn't know what it was at first, but my arms would go numb. My face would go numb. I feel like my throat was swelling shut sometimes. I couldn't breathe. Sometimes I feel like I had a 1,000-pound weight on my chest, like my heart was going to stop. And I didn't want to say anything to the guys I worked with because I worked in this little kind of tight special operations community. I thought if I'd say something, the guys would think I was weak and I wouldn't be able to do my job anymore. So I kept my mouth shut, tried to push it down and keep doing my job. And it worked for a little while, but the symptoms got worse. And I started having these moments where I wouldn't remember things, almost felt like out-of-body experiences. And I eventually got in a situation to where I was alone for 2 weeks with local nationals only. And I made some decisions that really not only put myself in danger, but put other people in danger. And I realized that was a time where I had to speak up and say something. And when I did, just like I had feared, I was brought home. I sat before a psychologist, and I was diagnosed with PTSD. I didn't even know what PTSD was at the time. I'd never heard of it before. You may think I'm kidding, but 2007, in this little community that I was in, I'd never heard of it. When a doctor said I had PTSD, I thought it was something I contracted or something. I was like, okay, well, give me a shot for it and send me back to Afghanistan. But it's post-traumatic stress disorder. And my buddies in the back, they say I'm not disordered, I'm just short. I hate that word, disordered, right? If I could spend a whole another couple of hours talking to you guys about the truth behind what PTSD is and what it's not. But the truth is we're not disordered when our body does very natural things the way it's designed to do based off of unnatural experiences that we have to do as Marines. And there's ways to deal with it and there's ways not to deal with it. And in the back, tables in the back, we have tons of information if you guys have questions about that. But for me at that time, I didn't understand what it was and what it wasn't, and the symptoms were very real. In fact, I felt like I was literally going to die at any moment. My panic attacks were so bad that I felt like my body was shutting down and that I was physically dying. And I felt like if I did anything physical or anything engaging, that my body would just shut down. I felt like if it was in a room, it was closing in on me. I felt like if it was outside, I couldn't control my situation, so I was in constant panic. And so the doctor gave me these prescriptions of medication that made me feel completely numb and like a zombie, and I didn't want to take them. So I was trying to find something to take me out of the situation. My wife and my counselor were trying to get me to engage in something physical. I had always done wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. For those who are familiar with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I was also a professional MMA fighter on the side while I was a Marine, and I was undefeated, so I was pretty good at it. And so they encouraged me to get out there and get on those mats and train. And I was worried that doing something physical would shut down my body, but I agreed to do it, and I got on those mats. And when I got on those mats for the first time, guys, I felt like I found the cure. Because you can't think about Afghanistan and your problems and train jiu-jitsu. If your mind's not there, your buddy's going to strangle you. You have to pay attention. So my mind was focused, and I was like, man, this is great. If I could just train, 24 hours a day, then I got this thing licked, right? That was kind of my mindset, and so I just wanted to dive into that. And you could have something good for you. You could have a medicine for having a cold or something, but you could abuse that medicine. And that's what I did with jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is still awesome. I still do it. I'm a 3rd-degree black belt under Carlson Gracie Jr. I still train every day. And in fact, the work we do at Mighty Oaks is very stressful and hard. And when I have a bad day, I just go over to the gym and I find like some 19-year-old stud and I choke him out. I love it. It's great. And it was always great for me. But the truth is I took this thing that was great for me and I abused it. I poured my life into it and never got better. Some people will dive in bottles of alcohol. Some people will take pills. Some people will do crazy adrenaline things that's dangerous for them. Some people do all kinds of things. For me, I dove into that sport. And you put that much time in anything and you're going to be successful. And I was. My school that I owned had built up in 3 years to 1,000 students. It's a lot of money that I was making. And then my fighting career really took off. At my peak, I was 16-0. I was number one ranked flyweight in the U.S., number 6 in the world, won a world title belt. And I eventually became 18-2 as my final record in MMA. And I had reached this pinnacle. I was fighting on all the big shows, on Strikeforce and Showtime and Bellator and World Series of Fighting. And all these things on the outside looked like I had it all together and successful. But the truth is I never dealt with any of these issues. My home was still a mess. My family was still falling apart. My children were still dealing with an angry lunatic running around their house. And I was still having these panic attacks and sleepless nights. I had never fixed anything. I was just successful professionally. And you're in a situation like that, eventually it's going to come crashing down. And it did for me. Our marriage started to go further and further apart. In fact, I'd spend many nights sleeping in the gym or sleeping at a friend's house, sleeping in another bedroom. I'd say the loneliest place I've ever been in my marriage is not in Afghanistan. It's been in my own bed with my wife's back turned to me in a dead marriage. Our marriage was completely dead. We both thought it was over. I walked out on our family and the relationships with other women. I had an affair, didn't even care. My wife found out. I was totally reckless about it and had no concern at all. And my wife and I sat our children down and told them we were getting divorced and that it was going to be better. They weren't going to have to hear the fighting anymore. They weren't going to have to deal with the chaos anymore. And the truth is it wasn't going to be better. Our kids were devastated. And our family was on the brink of us just totally falling apart. In fact, we sold our home. We signed 2 separate 12-month leases and filed for divorce. My wife and I had 2 very different reactions. My wife, who's a strong lady of faith, she went to a church and she started praying for me. And I don't know how many people share that faith, but my wife would go in this church and I asked her, how'd you pray for me when I was doing this to you, when I was totally betraying our family? And she said she would just ask God, let me see Chad the way you see Chad. Let me forgive Chad the way you forgave Chad. Let me love Chad the way you love Chad. So she was fighting for me when I was turning my back on her. And I went in this apartment. I wanted to be single. There was girls around. And set up my little bachelor pad. And I had a Strikeforce fight on Showtime. It was a really big fight. And a lot of media around it and a lot of people lifting me up. And I'd really been in a situation where I surrounded myself with people that told me everything I wanted to hear and no one that told me what I needed to hear. I had no accountability in my life. And I was just like, in my own mind, I was on top of the world. I remember fighting this fight in Showtime. It was in the Toyota Center in Texas, and 10,000 people were in there. And man, it was just this knockdown, drag-out fight. I've won all my fights by submission except this fight. This was a decision, and it was a battle. I got knocked down on my butt, didn't even see it coming. This guy, Humberto De Leon, just threw an overhand right and found myself sitting on my butt. And I remember when I got knocked down, I was so offended, I can't believe this guy knocked me down. I'd never been knocked down before, and he swarmed on me to finish me. And I just got up, and I'm a pretty composed fighter, but I just got up and started street fighting. I wanted to win so bad, and just brawling with this guy. And I made it to decision, and my hand was raised in the split decision win. I remember being so happy, I'd won this fight. And then of the 10,000 people in that auditorium, I remember thinking, man, this is the first fight my wife's not here for. She wasn't there. All those people, my wife wasn't there. And it came over me I fought so hard in this fight when I got knocked down to win this stupid other notch in my record. But the most important fight in my life right now for my family, I'm not engaged in. And the reality of that sent me home in my apartment, and I sat down and realized something that really knocked me on the floor. I realized that before I had blamed everyone else in my life for all the situation I was in, right? I blamed my father for my childhood. I was mad at the Marine Corps for some stuff. I was mad at my wife for never understanding. I was mad at everyone, right? Everyone's an idiot. And it's true. There's a lot of idiots out there, right? Just get on the highway. I just got rear-ended on the way here, right? But the truth is, in my situation, I was the common denominator. It was me. And when I realized it was me, I came to the same hopeless thought that hits the home of the hearts of 20 plus veterans today, that I'm the problem. And maybe my family would be sad without me, but they're going to be better off. And when I came to that decision, I had decided I was to take my life. I would sit in my closet with my family pictures laid out and my pistol in my hand, trying to figure out how I was going to do it. I knew my kids would find me, and that was what was delaying me. But that thought that maybe my family would be sad without me, but they'll be better off. Again, 20 plus veterans a day find that thought. I often speak in churches around the country. And one Sunday a few years back, I was in a church in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. And every time I share my story in a church, I always give the flyers of our program. Our program's totally free, by the way, for veterans and military. We even pay for travel. And I gave the extension to that lifeline. Any veteran in this congregation needs help, come to our program. It's free. And sitting in that congregation was a Marine named Pete and his wife, Heather. And Heather does what wives do in church, nudged her husband that he needed this program. And he said, no, I don't want to take a spot away from someone else. I don't want to go. And so Pete didn't go. 6 months later, I got a call from Pastor Ron Woods. He's the pastor at church. And he told me a story how Pete had stood in back of a pickup truck surrounded by my police with a pistol in his hand. And the last thing Pete said was, tell my wife I love her and I'm doing this for her. And he put the gun in his head and he pulled the trigger, took his life. My wife and I went to Oklahoma to meet with Heather. And she's one of the most courageous women I ever met, by the way. She said, I want to speak to warriors on the other side of this story to let them know that my life isn't better, that he didn't do this for me. She came to, I think, almost 20 programs and stood in front of thousands of warriors and shared that side of the story. She talks about how when she went to the morgue and put her head on his chest, trying to wait for a heartbeat when he was laying on that metal table to come and it never came. How when she called his mom screamed and how his parents would never be the same again. She tells how in the middle of the night when she needs her husband, he's not there for her. And she said something that really just resonates with me. She said, Pete thought that he was taking away all the pain by taking his life, but all he did was transfer that pain to everyone that loved him. And I watch her talk, this brave lady, and I think, man, my wife, I'm so thankful that's not my wife giving that story because me going through with that decision. I was sitting in that closet with my family pictures out and a pistol in my hand, trying to decide who was going to find me, and that thought of my children finding me, that was the delaying factor. And then my wife came to my door unwittingly, intervening. She knocked on my door, and I remember sliding the pistol and hiding it under a blanket in my closet and went and answered the door. And she started asking me to sign some papers, and I started an argument with her just to be a jerk. And in the middle of this argument, she asked me a question that radically changed my life. She asked me how I could do everything that I did in the Marine Corps. We met when we were 17 and 18 years old. She saw me become a recon Marine. She saw me train for deployments and do the things we did. She saw me get ready for these MMA fights, like cut weight. I cut like 30 pounds. I'm not a big guy. I cut 30 pounds getting ready for a fight. I look like a Holocaust victim. Like the amount of discipline it takes to do some of these things you see me do. She's like, how could you do all of that? And when it comes to your family, you'll quit. Now, I don't know about you Marines and sailors, but there's no more soul-cutting word to me than to be called a quitter. But the truth is, she was absolutely right. I had been successful at professional things in life. When it came to the most important things, being a husband, being a father, being a young 17-year-old kid that raised his hand and said, hey, I want to do something important in my life. I got a second chance. I quit on all those things. And it was time for me to get back in the fight. I'd even quit on my own health and my own will to live. And so I made a decision. I made a radical decision that day. It's kind of how I am. I make radical decisions and I jump all in. I made a decision that I was going to turn things around. I didn't know how, but I knew I couldn't do it by myself, and I knew I couldn't do it with the people I surrounded myself with. And so I asked my wife, is there someone at this church you're going to that could help hold me accountable to this decision? And she introduced me to a man named Steve Toth. Now, Steve never served in the military. In fact, he was just a small business owner at the time. And I met him at a Starbucks coffee shop. And we sat down, and I had written a perfect 5-paragraph operational order of how I was going to fix my life. It was really good, guys. I put it all together, and I was like super proud of it. And I slid it over to Steve, and I said, hey, check this out. This is my plan. I'm going to fix things. I was so manipulative. I would have said all the right things. And Steve looked at it, and he didn't even read it. And he slid it back over to me and told me I was going to fail. I remember being like super offended. I'm like, who is this prick? Like I like put all this work in this thing. This guy didn't even know me. He didn't even read it. And he tapped on it. He said, this doesn't have anything to do with your relationship with God. I can't help you, and I'm not going to waste your time, and I'm not going to waste mine. Now, guys, look, I'm not here to preach at you guys today. That's not what this event's about. But we talked about mind, body, spirit, and that was the missing piece for me. I had tried everything. I tried the MMA. I tried the jiu-jitsu. I tried the pills. I tried the counseling. None of those things worked. It was time for me to try something different. In fact, it's one of the main sayings we have at Mighty Oaks Warrior programs with the warriors that come there. If what you're doing isn't working, then why not try something different? It was time for me to try something different. So I trusted this man, Steve, and Steve introduced me to a relationship with God. And for a whole year, he mentored me in biblical manhood. And what I discovered as I recalibrated my life from living my life my way to living my life the way I believe I was designed to live is I found a radical transformation within me from the inside out. And all these things that I was missing began to change. I found restoration in my own relationships with my wife and my children and my life. I found hope for the first time in a long time. And I found what I think most of us feel missing our whole life. And that's probably why many of us join the military, and that's purpose. Mark Twain says it like this: the two most important days in a person's life are the day that they're born and the day they find out why. For me, like through this process, I felt like I discovered why. And it's to be here with you today. Why would I come here today and share all my garbage with you? Right? Because I know that the greatest failures in this life are not our mistakes, but when we don't learn from those mistakes, we don't pass them on to others to learn. Right? So my purpose in life has really been found in knowing that I wasn't the only one. You see, when I was going through this, I thought I was the only one. I thought no one's marriage could be as bad as mine. No one's life could be as bad as mine. No one could feel so depressed that they want to stick a pistol in their mouth. Right? No one could feel that bad. But the truth is, I wasn't the only one. There are 20 plus veterans a day, every day. The divorce rates. I wasn't the only one, but I felt like I had found the solution. I felt like if I was dying of like stage 4 terminal cancer and this guy, Steve, gave me the cure, I felt obligated to share it. And that's why I'm here today. I came to this realization that as bad as things may have been in my past, whether Afghanistan or my childhood, and maybe for you, whatever your past is, as bad as those things may be, those things didn't lead me into that closet with my pistol in my hand. What led me there were the choices that I made in response to those things. And we never lose control of the ability to choose differently, to choose to step off those X's in our life, to be able to choose to move forward. When I discovered this, I chose to move forward. I chose to share that with others. And we started the Mighty Oaks Foundation. I had no business, to be honest with you, starting a foundation at that time. My wife's heart was still bleeding. My life was still upside down. But I was just passionately committed to sharing what I had discovered with others. And we started it. And I couldn't be more thankful that we did. We've at events like this, we've probably spoken to over 100,000 troops. That core program that we run, that 1 week intensive, we run those 1 week intensives totally free. Like I said, we pay for travel, everything. We do these amazing ranches around the country, and we do 30 of those a year. We've had 2,250 graduates come through those programs. Up until last week, by the way, out of those 2,250, we've had 0 suicides. Sadly, last week we had our first alumni take their life, and it was hard for us, but the truth is, it's a reminder of why we do what we do. And so we had some very successful programs that we get to do, and then we get to do resiliency events like this. And by the way, in the back, one of the efforts we do in our resiliency event is we give out resources, we give out books. Last year, I think we gave out 56,000 books to troops on leadership, resiliency, spiritual resiliency, and different topics. So there'll be some books in the back that you can grab for free, and we want to share that with you. I want to close with this. We talk about that word resiliency and what it means. A lot of people don't understand what it means. Being resilient means living a life of character. It means living a life of discipline and integrity. Words that we throw around the military a lot, but we have to understand that those words aren't easy to live out. They aren't easy to live out. They're not convenient to live out. But the great thing about speaking to a group like this, a group of Marines and sailors, is I know that you guys know the hardest things in their life come on the other side of the most difficult challenges. Living a resilient life isn't supposed to be easy. Nothing about being a Marine is easy. Being a sailor in the Marine Corps is easy, right? But it's worth it. I look back at my life and think about that fork in the road that I was in. When I was trying to make the decision, right? Because essentially it was a fork in the road for my life. I was trying to make a decision of one, whether I want to live or die, or whether I want to divorce my family or not, right? And I'm so thankful that I chose that other route. It terrifies me to look back 8 years ago and think, if I would have taken my life, where my children would end up. In fact, 1 in 3 children from a parent that commits suicide takes their life as well. It terrifies me to think if I would have divorced my family, given up on my family, where my children would be right now. I'm so proud of my kids right now. I have a 21-year-old Marine Corps reservist he's about to leave for Afghanistan. He has a job lined up as a police officer when he gets back. My youngest son is going to start off his training to be a firefighter. My daughter wants to be a school teacher. I'm so proud of where they are right now. And I think, man, what would have happened if I would have chose to divorce my family at that time? Where would they be? It terrifies me to think about. What would have happened if I would have pulled that trigger and taken my life? But I'm glad I didn't. I'm glad I'm here with you guys. And it's my hope and prayer for you that as you face the X's in your life, that you'll be able to press forward and move into lives that I believe you were created to live and live those resilient lives. In the back, we're gonna have a table with information on Mighty Oaks. There's a flyer back there. the flyers for our program. If there's any donation stuff on there, please disregard that. We're not here raising money. That's not for you guys, it's for other people. But those programs are totally free for you. The travel's free. And if you don't feel like you need to go, grab that flyer, tuck it in your cargo pocket, stick it in your glove box of your car. You never know when you're gonna run into somebody who's struggling, needs help. You give them that flyer, it might save their life. It literally may save their life and save their future, save their family. So grab hold of one of those. The books and back are free as well. To the command, thank you guys so much for having me here. Marines and sailors, thank you. And God bless you all. Semper Fi. Thank you, sir.